material. There's a gesture towards the object, a movement on the object, a motion with the material. There's a pause, a rotating gaze, years of observing, black holes into a minute, final project, idiosyncratic. If I give it to you or you buy it from me, it doesn't make you a materialist. Materialism is an ugly word. Materials shaped by nimble and inspired hands, hands that know and never know is beauty. There's movement, there's an object, there's material, there's a gesture.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about making slab bases. So this is sort of the next step off of us doing our box plates, where we let our slabs set up. We want them to be set up enough that they're, there's not a whole lot of bend and they can kind of stand up by themselves. And then we cut them up and we put them together. And this time, instead of just doing one big slab with our template and putting some walls on there, we're going to do another slab that we put on top to sort of make some kind of base shape. So when we need to think about, thickness and all that. And so, the first time I put one together, this was one of the first ones. So I made my slabs, try to let them set up and stuff, and then cut my walls to strips. And just like when I do these box plates, I just use the width of this wider sort of metal ruler, right? And that ends up being pretty nice. And it's, just about 1.25 inches wide. And that makes a pretty good little wall to put on top of, the slab to make these little box plates. So the first time I did these slab vases, I did the same thing. I just cut out my strips, go there, a few slabs put together and stuff, and then sort of let it dry. Now this one ends up being, it's a little bit wobbly. It's not quite stable enough because I don't think this is wide enough here, right? Even though these slabs are a little thicker and a little heavier, they didn't work out so well. So the next year I tried to work on, making them sort of wider. So instead of just one ruler, I thought, well, let's put both these together, and we end up with about 2.5 inches wide. And it was 1/2 inch sort of slabs about. So it just visually then looks too heavy, too thick, too wide for this size. Now, if I was going to go on a bigger scale, then I might want to have it be that wide for stability and a thicker, heavier slab, for stability too, and just structure of it. And then it would look okay, I think, at that size. But in this sort of size of only being, under 12 inches, just above 10 maybe, it's a little heavy looking. And it's just sort of an aesthetic choice it's just not, to me, visually pleasing to look so heavy like this. So then, the next time I started experimenting with making sure that I use 3/8 slabs, so a little thinner, so it makes it look a little lighter. And then, going not as wide as that one. So then I figured we really should be about 2 inches wide on my strips that I do for the walls. And then when I edge it, it looks, to cut these sort of edges on there, it looks thin, right? Doesn't look too heavy, so it has a light sort of quality to it, but it's, stable enough on its width. This one needs a little grinding to make it sit right. It's got a little wobble to it, but we'll get to that someday. But that's about right. So 3/8 thick slab with a 2-inch sort of wide walls that we're going to put down there. So then it ends up being really 2 3/4, because you're going to have your 2-inch wide strips that you do for your walls, and then you're going to have both your slabs that are sandwiching those side walls there, and then they're going to be 3/8. So it'll, when it's wet, and put together, still damp, leather hard and stuff, it's going to be 2 3/4 inch wide. So that's about, you know, a good sense. And then it's going to shrink and stuff like that. And it should relatively light. Now we have all kinds of options here, the templates. So you can really just take some of your box plate designs and, you know, put it sort of together. Like, you know, this was this box plate. Well, this will make a great vase too. Just be wider and pops up just like that. And instead of having a wall here separating those things, you could have a little spot that's open right there. That could be where you would put in sort of flowers. And then you have a natural sort of foot situation here because of that curve right here. So that would be, this would work out really well as a template for vase. This one too, which makes kind of a simple, you know, shape of a box plate, right? But it also could be, you know, this way, right, as a base, or, you know, this way, like a student had done in the past. And he just has this little opening right there to have some sort of flowers come out. Now these feet that he put on there is good, always good to have 3, but he really probably should have just had 2 rails that went this way that would stop it from doing that. But because these 2 are here and they're sort of angled like that, so it's not quite stable enough, right? But see, you could see it could look kind of nice this too, like this angle going here, and then whatever floral arrangement you might put in there might be headed this way. Could be nice and interesting. So that one works out really well. And then, you know, here's another one that was done, and normally people use the template that's ready. It might be sort of like that, as a sort of traditional looking vase, with a little bit of, you know, not being sort of perfectly symmetrical, having a little bit more of a fun curve to it. But this student decided to do it the other way around. So it's a nice wide stable base. He probably could have put a couple rails going this way that would keep it sort of stable and lift it a little bit, would have been nicer. But really nice glaze job on it without, you know, no texture, just kind of a combo that made, kind of created some texture and some stuff on it. It looks really good. It's a nice little base. So all those things can work. So we just really want to make sure that we have, you know, our slabs kind of going and set up, and then make sure we have all our tools and stuff. And first, you know, make the slabs, get whatever texture you might want on there. And then we can actually draw out a template. So when I draw my template out, you know, I want to think about how this piece is going to stand up. So I want to stay within, like, you know, here's our 8.5 by 11 sort of sheet. So kind of want to fill that in probably. But so I want to sort of decide on those things, you know, if I'm going to create one here. So when I think about, you know, how it's going to stand, how it's going to look and stuff like that. And so do I do a traditional sort of vase shape, or do I maybe want to do something, you know, sort of funky? Maybe I've seen something on, you know, the internet or something that I thought was an interesting looking shape for a vase, and maybe I'll try to sort of mimic it, you know. But if we did a traditional sort of vase, I would have sort of my opening here as I'm looking at it. And then, you know, I might think about my base. I want it to be, you know, not too small where it's going to be, you know, easy to tip over. You know, it's better that a vase is a little bit bottom heavy. If you put water in, you know, you're going to have some weight down there to help keep it a little bit more stable. But we want to think about that. So got that, and here's my lip. And so then I could just, you know, sort of bring that down and just kind of sort of sketch out, and maybe think about having these sort of curves, and then comes down. Kind of get the body of there, and then think about maybe curving that in a little bit more. Maybe that base is actually, as I'm looking at it, feeling like it's too wide. So something in there. And then once I have that kind of sketched out, then I can kind of come in and make some darker, hard lines that I will cut. And then I have, you know, something like in that range. Then I can just start, you know, cutting out along that darker, harder line that I made with the pencil there, and just go until I sort of cut them out, so you get there all the way out there. Now, this one has been sort of become my favorite shape. I like putting it together, the way the sort of the walls work and stuff like that. And so I actually, you know, use an old piece of flooring that I pulled out of a dumpster behind a flooring company, and some of their scrap. And so it's, you know, it's a more industrial flooring. It lasts longer, although it's already getting kind of ripped here and stuff, and from use. But I've used it a lot, so. This one's good. I've always liked this one too. It's kind of the same thing, except for it's just curved instead of sort of those angles. So those are both sort of great. That's what, you know, this one came off of. So they both sort of work really well. So I just got to make sure I have the right tools too. So I have my template I'm going to use, whichever one I want to pick out. I want to make sure I have a ruler. Right, it's nice to have a longer one so I can cut my straight edges, and then I can measure my walls, stuff like that. I have a piece of paper, pencil, and, you know, scissors to cut out the template that I want. And then I want to make sure I have my other tools that we normally have. So I have, you know, my old butter knife I use to cut the clay. I have maybe, you know, some old kind of gift card or some kind of card that uses my sort of rib, right? I want to have a brush for putting on sort of a little bit of water, right? For when I do my edges and stuff, my scoring and slipping. I want to have my trusty paper clip for scoring. And that's really about all I really need to put sort of together. And then I'm going to want to make sure I have, you know, enough slabs to do all my pieces, right? And my strips for the sidewalls and my two main pieces, and then have some soft clay that I can roll out coils and stuff so I can attach and reinforce all my parts that I'm going to put together on this one. Okay, so now after I've thrown out my slab and I have it ready there, got it smooth, I have it about 3/8 inch thick. I'm going to use some kind of texture. This ornamental pear is still my favorite to use, so I will use this. And again, of course, remember that when I put this on, I talked about this last time, I don't want to hit these edges. I want to keep it away from the edges so I can still peel it off really easily. And then I should be able to just peel it off, back down, and have enough in there to do with what I want to be able to do with the template that I'm going to use for the base. So I got some rips here, but I just need about this much to get my template in there. Okay, now so that I have my slabs are all prepped, and I have 2 slabs that I've made sure that will accommodate my template, right? Because I need 2 for the, you know, the main sort of forms, and then I have 1 sort of longer one that I made that will be my sidewalls. I should be able to get, you know, hopefully enough out of there to do that. And I like to for my slab that's going to be sidewalls, I won't do the texture. I'll keep it sort of smooth, especially for this form, because it's a lot easier and faster to be able to not worry about what side is out. Like if I did texture on this, then I have to make sure every time that I have my texture side out, you know, all the way through. So this way I'd rather just have it be so that I have texture for both the outside, and then I'm going to have the sides will be sort of smooth. And it's really, really important that I make sure that my slabs are set up enough that I should be able to sort of put them like this and not have them flop on me. So they should be stiff enough to do that, to hold their shape, but they've got to be able to be soft enough that like I can still put my nail into it, right? And be able to kind of cut without a lot of, you know, struggle. This piece that I make for my side walls maybe, you know, doesn't matter as much, right? It could be a little bit, well, it could have a little bend to it, especially if you're going to be cutting any sort of form that has curves in it. You're actually going to want to make sure this has a little more of a bend to it so it curves nicely and doesn't, like, you know, sort of separate or break as you do that. So, and again, always when I cut my pieces out, I want to make sure that I try not to use the edge of the slab that's sort of dried up, so I'm getting a fresher sort of cut from the middle there, right? And I can avoid any sort of possible bad spots where I have a rip or anything like that in the slab. So this piece is actually a little bit wetter than this one. This one's actually dried up a little bit more. So I might make this piece my bottom, and this one will be the top when I put it together, because this is going to hold its shape more. So, and I really want to make sure I can cut everything, all my parts, and then put them together in the same sort of sitting, right? It's optimum, right? Because I don't want to cut out my shape until I'm ready to go, until I'm ready to start putting stuff together. So I'll start off with this piece here, and I will sort of, you know, get it set in there, kind of figure out where the best sort of spot is in there, and set it in there. And then really important, as much as possible, that I keep my blade sort of upright, right, sort of vertical here. So when I'm cutting, because if I start cutting with sort of angles there, as I put things together, they're not going to line up very well. They could be off a little bit, won't make a big difference, but you want to sort of avoid that as much as possible. So cut. And this is cutting, you know, nicely. I'm not struggling to kind of cut through that. Kind of put some of the stuff to the side in case I need it. I don't think I'm going to use that, but never know. Come back, make sure this isn't moving. Now, what's important when we have texture on these pieces is that you pay attention to the side that has the texture, right? So I've made the mistake before where I cut my piece, took my template, went like this, cut the piece, and then when I put them together, I got one side of the textures on the inside of the pot. So it's important I cut it like this. So what I want to do is take this and flip it over and then make my other piece there. Cut. So that way this piece and this piece will go like this, and the texture will be on the outside on both sides there. So that's where I want to kind of pay attention to that sort of thing. Now this one I can feel it's like, it's a little bit stiffer to cut through, it's that much drier. But as I cut through, like this stuff that may be kind of dry, this is going to be a nice clean sort of softer edge because it's in the middle of the slab where it hasn't dried out so much. Okay, so now I have my two pieces. So since this one is actually a little bit stiffer than this one, I'm going to have this piece be the second piece I put on top as I'm putting it together, because I know this is going to hold its shape. It's not going to slump in when I put them together. And you'll see what I mean as I put those things together. So we'll start with this one on the bottom here. So this will be the bottom. I'll score all this area, put the walls together, and then put that piece on top. So now I got to come over and cut my side walls out. So I want to get a nice straight edge done first. And I want to avoid some of these sort of rips on the side here, and that's because this clay here is recycled clay, so it's just old scrap clay that we sort of mixed up and added a little more powder after getting it, really soaking it down and slaking it, so it's really wet, and then adding some dry clay to kind of get it to the right consistency. But you really have to wedge it up. It's really loose, so you have to really wedge it up really well. And I may not have quite wedged it up as much as I should, so, but it should be okay. And compared to taking it out of the bag, which is, you know, been sort of de-aired and compressed, and it's, you know, it's a lot tighter. So I'll flip this around, and then so I can cut, now start cutting out strips. And I think I should have enough to be able to get out of there. So I want to cut a 2-inch wide strip from the walls, 2-inch wide. It's important. So then when we put it together, its thickness is going to be, in its wet state, going to be 2 3/4. It's going to be 3/8 slab, 3/8 slab with a 2-inch wide sort of sidewalls in there and put together. That is a good stable sort of piece there, you know, base for that width, you know, or depth, however you want to look at it, to sort of stand up and not be too, you know, tipsy-turvy, you know. So that's what we want to be aware of. So again, I'm just going to measure out 2 inches, right? And I want to probably make like 3 marks. So again, measure twice, cut once. So there's one. And if I can get 3 out of here, that should be enough to make all the walls for that. So that'll be important. Mark with 2 inches, 2 inches. Double check those. Yep, should be good. Again, very, very important that I'm keeping this. The most important on these walls is that I'm keeping my blade as vertical as possible. Because if there's an angle, if I cut and I'm like this, when I put the wall on, it's going to be going at an angle like this on the wall. So it's really important that those all still stay. So I'll just cut my last little strip right here. Okay, so now I have my side walls all cut, right? I have enough length, I believe, to get through all this. I should have some left over. And so now I just got to start putting little pieces in all these spheres, right? Just like how we did with the box plates. you know. And again, like if I had a curve here, I would not want to have any seams in that curve. If I could go, you know, curve here, stop, or curve, then curve, you know, stuff like that. I want more continuous pieces. And when I do have joints, I don't want those joints butted together. I want them to be cut at an angle so they're sort of sitting on top of each other, right? So really important to sort of avoid anything like that. Now this is going to be the top, so I don't need to put a piece there. So I'll start here and then work my way down and then come back around. So the first piece, I put some of these aside here, and I don't need much there, so I'll just kind of cut a little piece off, enough to kind of do that first one, and then kind of see where we're at. So I want to sort of slide it over a little bit because this has a bit of an angle there. So kind of line it up and just kind of take a look at it. And then just sort of cut down to that line. And then here, the next piece I'm going to want to have come up against it like that. So I'm going to cut it at that angle down to this line. So the next piece will come like that. Now here's an interesting thing that's really kind of important. It makes it a lot easier when I do this shape, is that when I cut this like this, my next piece, if I had a shorter piece that I could just keep and cut, I could just flip it. And then that angle works out just perfect right there. So I can use this as a template for my angle. When I cut it here and then I flip it, and it comes up nice and flush right there, flipping over there. So why that works, I don't quite know, but it does. So that's something for your math teacher to ask and figure out for you. So so now I can use this as sort of my template there, and just kind of make a little mark, and then I will cut that piece at that angle. And the nice thing about, of course, working with clay, which I've said before, very, very forgiving. So if our cuts aren't perfect and they don't line up perfect, there's little gaps, we'll just take some soft clay and fill those gaps in and smooth them out and get them all together and clean looking, and no one will ever know the difference except for yourself and maybe some other people that watch you do it. So I'm going to kind of cut my first couple pieces, so kind of line that up. And then I'm looking at this line right here, and I will cut down towards that and put this down. So now I want to get these first couple pieces set, and then I'm going to sort of work off them. So take this, kind of put down here, take this, and I need to score that up, right? Score that, score this, and it sits there. The next piece is coming here, so I need to score that. And so your clay should be soft enough that it's easy to kind of cut into it, but stiff enough that it's holding its shape. And then I'll take my little water, and this water has some little goop in it too, some little bits and pieces I kind of keep throwing in as I work. And then a little bit right there. And I like to shift it into position. So it's sort of suctioning up where I scored that up, and the water sort of grabbing and stuff like that. And I set that. And then my next piece, right, is going to go like that. So I need to score this. Do some lines up top and then come back and cross hatch it. Right, and I already scored that. And then I'm going to score all this area. And then score this back side here, which is going to go down. Bit of water, bit of water, bit of water. Shift it into place so So kind of push it along that line there, and it'll sort of grab and sort of, as you shimmy it, and, I'll come back and reinforce all of this. And I see I didn't do a very good cut. So before I move on, I will fix that line there. Again, that's a nice thing. If this was wood and I was building a box and I made a really bad cut, I might not be able to clean that up and fix it, But here with clay, very, very forgiving. So now I got those two pieces in. Now where I cut before, I should be able to just flip it, right, and come in, except for that I had made a bad cut. So we'll fix that cut, clean that up a little bit. And then I should be able just to kind of come and sort of line that up right there, and then work on what's basically this line, and kind of get a good look at it. And kind of cut that, so then my next piece will just go like that. I'll just, I cut it here, and then I'll just flip it and come back and do that next piece. So I could even just do that now and have two pieces ready to go. And again, sort of look at that line, kind of hold it, try to keep it upright. And there we go. So it looks like one of these strips is actually going to be good to come here and get about maybe halfway. The next one, so I should have plenty as I realize that now. So again, once again, I'm going to score this part. Goes down, right, this goes there, so I need to score that edge, score this, score that, and it's going to go in there. Make sure to get a good crosshatch on them. Shift into position, kind of move it back and forth to get it sort of suction up, right, where that water is and where that scoring is, and then kind of just, a little bit of push on the exterior there. I'm going to reinforce all this. I'm not so worried about that right now, but I want to make sure it kind of holds together as I keep moving together. So now I'll just keep going all along there and cut and put all these pieces together, right? And come all the way back up to here, and then I can come back and actually reinforce the seams. Okay, so now that I have this all put together, before I put this other piece on, I want to go back and reinforce every seam that I can get to. So all these interior ones down here, so all this lines here in the bottom, entire one, and then all these inside vertical ones. So here, here, and here, and all these places here. And then on some of these places like here, if I think, I may add a little bit of clay just to kind of reinforce that from the inside. I'll come back on the outside and get these inside, or these, where they get these corners here that are coming inside on the outside of the piece. But so, and again, this is when I want to have some fresh, soft clay, not stuff that I had set up. I can't use any of that other scrap. So, and just roll out coil, right? And I don't need it to be very thick at all. It's pretty thin as I can kind of make it, really, without drying it out too much as I'm working with it. So I have this thing that looks like a very long earthworm, and I will go and start, sort of up top here. And as I'm sort of pushing it in, so it's this long right now, but I will get more out of that as I sort of am pushing it in. It'll sort of spread as it comes down there. So start right there towards the top, and then sort of push. And I want to be careful that I don't push too much and blow any of these walls out. So I'm just going to push that along, and just that one little coil is going to get close to halfway on the sort of bottom part, or more than halfway, I guess. And then come back and sort of push that, smooth that out. Now, way down in here, no one's probably going to be able to see, so I'm not worried. But up top, you're going to be able to see on the inside into about there. So those are the places that I'm really going to want to make sure that I kind of really get it nice and smooth and stuff like that. And then I'll make sure that, again, I do these sort of inside corners here. Push that up and down. Sometimes I like to push a little bit of extra clay on those seams on top here, but really make sure that I get that sort of smoothed in, stuff like that. And a place like this, let's say it's got a little gap, the cut wasn't, perfect, so I can kind of see, well, I might want to take a little bit of clay and really kind of push some clay in there and smooth that out on the inside there too. And you might be able to see that spot, so I want to make sure that's kind of smooth. You don't see a sloppy coil that got added. All right. So I just want to make sure that there's, your wall, side wall there, and this sort of flat spot here, and in that corner, I want to add in that coil. It's kind of a bracket to kind of help keep them together, to really just reinforce those things. And it's a vase. A vase, it's okay if a vase is a little bit on the heavy side. It's not something you're going to be carrying around all day with you, right? You put a little water in it, put some flowers, put it in the middle of your table or something, or maybe give it as a gift, and you add some flowers into it before then. So the only time you're really carrying it is when you're handing it off to the recipient of your gift, let's say. So it can be a little bit on the heavy side. That's okay. We're not worried about that. Still a functional piece, but we're not worried about that. So now I'm going to go back through and I'm going to do all these bottom sort of seams and then all these sort of vertical seams, and especially right here on the bottom where I have a bunch of little pieces that are together. It's really important to kind of really make sure that I get those real well and reinforce all those little seams and make sure they're really together there. Really important to do as much as possible on the inside before I close it up and I can't get to it anymore, okay? Okay, now so that I have the inside totally reinforced, now I can think about putting this thing on there. So it's really important that we do a really good job of scoring and slipping, because this side, we're not going to be able to reinforce underneath all here. We're going to be able to get into this spot, which is important, but we won't be able to get into the rest of it. So it's really important that we make sure that when we put this piece on, that we've done a really good job of scoring that up and getting some moisture back into it and stuff like that. And sometimes what happens is either your piece, if it gets too dry because you cut it and it took you a long time to get this done and it's getting kind of dry, you might have to, give it a little bit of a mist to kind of give it a little bit of water back in, or maybe it's not too, it hasn't set up enough, because when I put this on, I don't want to have a slump, right? So it's going to be very important that this has set up enough that when I put it on, it's going to hold its shape. Now the bottom piece, the first piece could be a little damper, right? and it maybe would slump if I had over here, but as long as it's sitting here and flat, it'll be okay. But it's best that, of course, that they are about the same when you put them together. So I've already scored that, and I put a little bit of water on there, but like, for example, if I feel like this needs to set up more, I might want to just cover this and let this set up a little bit more, you know, stop and take a break, maybe have a cup of tea, you know, just be a little bit more patience that you might need after letting your tea steep for a while. And then you can just, you know, enjoy your cup of tea, contemplate about the day's events, the world, what's going on. Maybe go outside and just do nothing. Just drink your tea and listen to the birds. It's really one of the hardest things to do, is to just do nothing. Just to, you know, try to clear your mind and try not to think about really anything. It's difficult. You should try it. Well, that's enough of a tea break. Let's get to work here. So I scored this up. This is holding its shape pretty well. It's not going to slump on me. I need to score my edges there. So quick, I like to kind of draw a line and then crosshatch, line, crosshatch, and just go through and get that pretty good. And this is the piece that has dried up pretty decently. So I know it's going to hold its shape and not slump on me, but I do have to kind of worry about making sure that I get a really good score and sort of slip. So I really sort of scratch this up and get a decent amount of moisture back into it so it suctions up and really grabs this next piece. And then just really make sure that, and now I'm going to get some of that goop. I've been throwing those little pieces, dry pieces in there as I work. Maybe get a little bit of that goop in there to hopefully get a nice sort of seal on that too. Besides just the suctioning up and the grabbing and sort of meshing of that parts there. And right down here I could feel like it was a little bit drier than other spots. So I really kind of maybe come back, and sometimes, you know, you might even want to, after you get a little water, come back and rescore it a little bit. You know, kind of mix some of that stuff around and help create a little bit of a slurry. So I get this sort of goop that I'm grabbing, picking up, and, you know, get that sort of going and push that in there. Okay, this is where you find out when you put it together how vertical your cuts were, because on the walls and both your slabs, because they'll not always line up real great. So I just kind of shift it around. You want it to move a little bit. Push these walls, these right spots. In any place you have a little extra gaps or whatever, we can cut away flush. We can also add some clay, and actually even when we edge it, then we'll hide all that. So moisture and pressure are always important to join clay to clay. So besides the fact it's got to have some moisture in it, but then you add a little moisture when you score and put a little water, but then you gotta get that pressure. So you want to just go and put a little bit of force on the edges here. Really make sure that I'm kind of pushing down, getting that on there. Now see, I have these overhangs here, so I just come back with my knife here, and maybe I'll just kind of cut some of that flush where those problems there. Here I can kind of push that in. It's kind of okay there, there, down here maybe there's a little bit. Right in here, there's a little bit. Just cut that off. And then, now this section right here has no reinforcement. So what I like to do, because I will forget which side is which, I like to put some kind of little mark somewhere, and I know that this side right here is the one that has no reinforcement. Just for now, I can smooth that out later, but so I know. So I'm going to really make sure I can get to whatever I can. So if I can get to these spots here and then kind of maybe around the corner with my finger, a couple spots, that'll be really good. So again, I need a little bit of fresh clay, soft clay, so I don't have to worry about scoring and slipping there, because I'll just really smooth it in there, put that pressure, and it's already pretty damp. So I'll try to kind of get it so that it's long enough to kind of go around this little corner. So right in here on both sides there, kind of push in there. And I like to come up on top, and I'll do that with these ones too, and add a little bit just there on top, and I'll smooth that out. Again, so what can I reach? About right there, and then come up and here, and there's a little bit short there, so I'll just add a little bit right there too. Maybe on this side here. So I'll really make sure that I compress that, go back and forth, really get like this sort of back and forth there, attach that, drag that new clay across these tops here. And this is the stuff that people are going to see, this top here, so I really want to make sure that really gets nice and smooth. And as far down in there as you can see too. You know, some of the little imperfections are going to be covered up with glaze, but not necessarily all of them. So make sure I really get enough pressure to push down and make sure it's attached without pushing your walls apart. And as far as my fingers can go, nice. So the important part here is that this top here is going to have to dry as slow as possible. The rest of it will be, covered. But so even, when you're pretty much done and you're letting it dry, you're going to have it draped at least halfway over this, depending on the weather, right? Now the other thing I want to do, and I did it on the outside here, but here, these inside spots, these corners, and right here where the seam is, I can kind of still see it. I want to get some more clay. So where these seams are, I'm just going to kind of push a flat clay on there and kind of go back and forth. And then on the inside here, get some there, attaching there. And then again, a little bit of flat clay right in there. And then anywhere else I see a gap where maybe my seams weren't so perfect, I might want to add a little bit of clay. This is a good candidate right there. Just get a little more clay in there. Kind of push that back and forth. For starters, I just want to get it in there. Just want to get it attached. So smooth out. Anywhere I think I can use a little bit on these seams. Maybe go on the other side too. Look, got some gaps right in here. Just gonna fill it in. Once I have that kind of pushed through with my finger, then I'll come back through and use my card here. Just kind of pull everything sort of flush. Get both sides. I see a little spot maybe, right? As soon as I can see that seam, I really want to get rid of that. So I want to just add some clay. Hide that. And then I got all this bottom part to sort of worry about too. And that's really important. There's a lot of small pieces, so it's really important that we spend some time sort of smoothing that out. Just making sure that we got any possible gaps sort of filled. I really made sure that the inside where I reinforced, I added a lot of extra clay here and there to sort of really make sure that all those little pieces were going to hold together. Because if there's going to be any cracks, as long as it's going to come along where we had seams. So we're going to want to really be important that we dry this really, really slowly. It's important that the slabs have set up enough so you can attach them. It's also going to be really important that this thing sits. So it feels pretty stable right now. So this width is good and feels pretty stable. It's really important that we focus on this area and really reinforce it, really make sure it's clamped down together, and this top part's going to dry real slow, because if we just leave it out, this will dry first. It's open here, air's going to get all over it around here. We have to pay attention to those things that, you know, with the weather, if it's raining, you know, things dry nice and slow, but, you know, currently it's dry and warm again, so and it's been getting even windy, and so stuff will dry out kind of fast on it if you don't keep it nicely covered and dry slow. So I want to get, the first time I put this together, I want to get to here, right? So I let my slab set up. Once they were ready, I cut it up and put it all together at the same time. So now I'm here, and so it's going to be important that I keep it wrapped. I have put together so many different pieces. Right? We have these two main pieces, and then I go 1, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. I got 12 and 14, 15, probably 15 little sidewalls put together, and these other pieces, 17 pieces put together. It's really, really important that for one whole day, this thing is entirely wrapped, not covered, but wrapped thoroughly all the way around and tight in plastic. So they can all kind of even out and sort of get to a similar sort of moisture content. And then the next day I can, you know, pull it out and then do some of my finishing work, right? So then I might take, you know, start dipping my finger in a little bit of water and kind of doing a little bit of polishing, getting rid of sharp edges, stuff like that. Right, just kind of trying to hide all the little sort of imperfections and stuff like that. All the way through, make it look real clean. Now I could leave these really sharp edges, or what's been nice has been edging them. So I've been doing that, sort of cutting this edge on there. And this one too, I cut the edge. And what I learned when I first started edging is that I would start up top and just cut down. But what I was realizing, I really didn't like the way that looked. I didn't like that little cut there. So realized that I needed to not start all the way down, but either come up or start a little bit down and then cut in the edge so that the top still maintained that sort of rectangle. I just feel like that looks better. So I would stick with that. And like before we showed with the sort of box plates is that, you know, I couldn't take my fishing line and, you know, just kind of look at that. It'd be actually probably easier if I laid it down and just cut a little bit of an edge on it. Take my finger, smooth that out. And then just when I was in, you know, say I'm edging this, I'm coming along there, turn this corner. So right before I get to the top, I sort of pop off. So I don't come to the very edge here. Do that. Makes it look sort of nice and finished. It actually gives it this feeling that it's a little bit lighter looking than it really is necessarily. So that works pretty well. Another thing I found is the Goodwills have some of these sort of little, like, there could either be wood, a little piece of wood, or this one was like a little piece of marble, and it had this attachment so that for cheese, you know, so you have a little board there, cheese board there, that you have your cheese and other stuff, salami or whatever you might have, crackers, and you can cut a little piece of cheese off there. So, and they come, and I can use this just like this, although it's a little bit big and unwieldy. Also taped underneath it were extra sort of wires. Things. So this is a nice little sort of wire that I could probably be better off attaching something here so I don't lose it. But again, then too, I could use this to try to be somewhat even on either side of that. And then just do a nice little sort of finishing on that edge. So I can just go through the piece and do this nice, you know, little edge here. And I like that aesthetic better. I like having it sort of have my texture here and sort of smooth and have this sort of edge on there. You know, and so that it is this wide from the side view, but with that edge there, it makes it look a little bit lighter. So visually it looks better. And I just don't want to come all the way to the top. Personally, I don't like the way that looks. So I like this, keeping this sort of rectangle and thing. And, you know, I'll make sure that both on the inside and the outside, I spent a little time rounding off that edge. Nice little smooth. That way the glaze will sort of flow over there nicely. We put glaze on there. So on the inside liner glaze that we may use, we want to have a nice sort of rounded edge there. And you could soften up these corners too by just giving a little bit of a round edge there. Make them look sort of decent. There. So once I've had it wrapped completely for a day, then the next, after I've done all my finishing work, smoothed it out, rounded the corners, made sure to kind of hide all my seams. If I edge it, and then I'm going to want to have it covered like this. So it's not wrapped now, it's just covered. And then when it gets a little bit drier, this is the last part I want to sort of expose. So I may even leave it after being covered, you know, wrapped for one day, and then covered for 3 or 4 days maybe, or whatever, while working on their stuff, glazing the rest of my pieces and stuff like that. Then I'm going to want to have something like this. So the rest of this bottom can kind of dry, but I want this to be the last sort of part that really sort of dries out. So this dries out real slow, because that's what happens. That's when you'll get little cracks. This one doesn't have it, but on some of the other first pieces I did, I let them dry too fast, and they ended up with a crack right here, because this is the most exposed when it's open. Air gets in here and all around it, and that's what you end up with getting a crack. So that's what we want to be wary of. As we get more complex here like this, we've added this, it's like the box plate. We had a flat slab and a few walls. Now we got this vase, it's a little bit bigger, and we have that extra sort of slab that we're attaching, and we can't even get to reinforce it all. It's going to be sort of important that we dry them really slow and be really sort of conscientious about how that works. Now the spot where I put the little X to mark that the other side there is actually gone now, I think, because it's where I took the edge off. But I can see in there, this is the side that doesn't have as much reinforcement. So really when I wrap it for the first day, what I want to do is the side that doesn't have as much reinforcement, I'd actually really like to have it be so that it's wrapped up really well and all the weight is on that one side where it doesn't have as much reinforcement, so that it's kind of pushing down on it overnight where it's attached, and then I could, do whatever, take my butter knife and kind of weigh down that plastic there. Make sure it keeps, nice and tight, and so the moisture can kind of move through the clay and kind of even out a little bit, and then pop it back out the next day and do all my little finishing work to make it look really nice. Now the last thing we have to kind of deal with is the sort of foot, how we make it stand up. And this flat part here is fine, really. I need to clean that up a little bit, smooth it and stuff, and maybe try to even it out. But right now it feels pretty good. But what I've done in the past is, after it's sort of set up a little bit more, is I've come back and just carved out a little bit of that, so I kind of have like a little foot ring here. Now I could make one. I could take some excess slab and kind of make a little piece, right? And cut it out and cut a little ring out basically and attach it. But it's really just easier just to carve it down a little bit so that I have only these edges here to worry about after it comes out of the glaze firing. If it has a little wobble, you can figure out where the high point is and grind it a little bit on some concrete until it loses its wobble. So this one's got a little bit of wobble, It just needs to be ground down on one corner for starters and see, and then keep working it a little bit until it sits better, right? But again, a little wobble doesn't really matter too much. You're not going to be moving it around so much and changing it all the time. As long as it can kind of settle, you put a little water in it, you can have your floral arrangement coming out, it'll be just fine. All right, let's get after it. Let's make some slab vases.